Part 1.
You will hear a man, Martin Hill, phoning an estate agent in order to find some accommodation. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 3.
Hello, Brindle's estate agents here. How may I help you?
Oh, good morning. I'm ringing to see what flats you have for rent at the moment.
Right. Can I start by just taking your name, Mr.
Hill. Martin Hill.
Right. And are you looking for a flat for yourself or, a family, perhaps?
Well, it's for 3 of us, myself and 2 friends. We're going to share together.
I see. What about employment? Are you all students?
Oh, no, we've all got full-time jobs. 2 of us work in the central bank, that's Chris and me, and Phil, that's the other one, is working for Hallam Cars, you know, at the factory about 2 miles out of town.
I'll put you down as young professionals then. And I suppose you'll be looking for somewhere with 3 bedrooms?
Yeah, at least 3. But actually, we'd rather have a 4th room as well, if we can afford it, for friends staying over and stuff.
Is that with a living room to share, plus kitchen and bathroom?
Yeah, that sounds good. But we must have a bathroom with a shower. We don't mind about having a bath, but the shower's crucial.
Okay, I'll just key that in. And are you interested in any particular area?
Well, the city centre would be good for me and Chris, so that's our first preference. But we'd consider anything in the west suburbs as well, really. Actually, for Phil, that'd be better, but he knows he's outnumbered. But we aren't interested in the north or the east of the city.
Okay, I'm just getting up all the flats on our books.
Now you have some time to look at questions 4 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 4 to 10.
Just looking at this list here, I'm afraid there are only 2 that might interest you. Do you want the details?
OK, let me just grab a pen and some paper. Fire away.
This first one I'm looking at is in Bridge Street and very close to the bus station. It's not often that flats in that area come up for rent. This one's got 3 bedrooms, a bathroom and kitchen, of course, and a very big living room. That sounds a good size for you.
So what about the rent? How much is it a month?
The good news is that it's only £450 a month. Rents in that area usually reach up to £650 a month, but the landlord obviously wants to get a tenant quickly.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit of a bargain. What about transport for Phil?
Well, there'll be plenty of buses, so no problem for him to use public transport. But unfortunately there isn't a shower in the flat, and that location is likely to be noisy, of course.
OK, what about the other place?
Let's see. Oh, yes. Well, this one is in a really nice location, on Hills Avenue. I'm sure you know it. This looks like something a bit special. It's got 4 big bedrooms and, there's a big living room. And, Oh, this will be good for you. A dining room. It sounds enormous, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds great.
That whole area is being developed, and the flat's very modern, which I'm sure you'll like. It's got good facilities, including your shower, and of course it's going to be quiet, especially compared with the other place.
Better and better. But I'll bet it's expensive, especially if it's in that trendy area beside the park.
I'm afraid so. They're asking £800 a month for it.
Whoa, it sounds a lot more than we can afford.
Well, maybe you could get somebody else to move in too. I'll tell you what, give me your address and I can send you all the details and photos, and you can see whether these two are worth a visit.
Thanks, that would be really helpful. My address is flat 5.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2. Part 2.
You will hear a presenter on a radio phone-in show. The presenter is talking to a woman who was bitten by a poisonous spider.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Today, we're continuing our Traveller's Tales. On the line we have Amanda Toddington, who had quite a nasty experience in Australia last year. Isn't that right, Amanda?
Yes. My husband and I were on holiday, and we were staying at a friend's house on the coast near Brisbane. It was towards the end of the holiday, and I was about to go into the garden and enjoy my breakfast. I walked out into the kitchen, slid my left foot into my shoe, and felt a tiny sting. It was pretty painless, but I shook the shoe off my foot and saw this tiny spider running out as the shoe hit the wall. Anyway, not being an expert, I presumed the worst, that I'd been bitten by something that was going to kill me, and I completely lost control. I don't think I've ever screamed so much in all my life. We'd been told beforehand to always check our shoes before putting them on, as it's a common way to get bitten. So I suppose it was my own fault, really.
So what was it that had bitten you?
Tony, that's our Australian friend, he immediately asked me if I knew what had bitten me, and I pointed to the corner of the room where I'd last seen the spider. He picked up a jar and found the creature in the corner where the shoe had hit the floor. "It's a redback," he said, and he gently placed the jar over the spider. The funny thing was, we'd been talking about some of the creatures we needed to be careful of a few days previously, and as he said the name redback, the conversation came flooding back to me. In particular, the fact that the bite can be extremely painful. I've found out since that the redback is from the same family as the black widow spider, and it's the female that does the damage, which it turned out was what I'd been bitten by.
You must have been absolutely petrified.
You can say that again. I remember feeling quite confused. I wasn't in a great deal of pain to begin with, and yet I could see from our friends' faces that they were concerned. Tony explained that the venom or poison of the bite spreads quite slowly, so the pain doesn't feel too bad at first. Gwen, Tony's wife, brought an ice pack, and Tony held it against the bite to make it less painful. Apparently, you're not supposed to put a bandage on the area, as this can make it hurt even more. Tony tried to put my mind at rest by explaining that this was quite a common bite, that the hospital would have an anti-venom, and that everything would be okay. But I was beginning to panic. We were flying back to the UK the next day, and I really didn't know what to do.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So what did you do?
Well, Tony phoned the doctor, who told him to check my symptoms for the next hour or two. As time went on, the pain became very intense, from my foot right up to my knee. My husband was on the internet and was reading out the possible symptoms. I wasn't feeling sick, and I hadn't yet developed a fever, but I had a terrible headache, and my foot was beginning to swell up. At this point, Tony decided to take me to the local hospital to be on the safe side. I really didn't want to go, as I had visions of being kept in for days and all our plans being spoilt. But Tony and my husband insisted. When we got to the hospital, I was relieved to see how casual everyone was when Tony explained I'd been bitten by a red-back spider. They told me to take a seat and got on with their work.
And did you receive any treatment?
By the time I got to see a doctor, the pain was very intense indeed, and I was getting quite upset. The doctor decided to give me a dose of an antivenom, which he assured me would eventually deal with the problem. Unfortunately, he also explained that it wouldn't have an immediate effect, and the symptoms might last for several days. But the story has a happy ending. My husband managed to book us onto another plane 1 week later. And even better news was that the symptoms of the bite finally cleared up after about 24 hours. Within a couple of days, I was back to normal again. So thanks to the spider, we managed to extend our holiday by a week.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear some students talking about their studies.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
It was packed. There simply aren't enough seats in Theatre 4. There were people on the stairs, people in the aisles. I don't imagine everybody was able to get in.
Was Jack with you?
No, of course not. I saw him with a pile of journals in the library as I walked past. You haven't seen him because you've been in here, in the kitchen, drinking coffee all morning, whereas he has been studying hard.
Not me. I've been in my bedroom reading for my assignment on education in the classical world. Very interesting. It was easier than I expected. I should have been at the gym training for my next race, but that'll have to wait. And did you find your first lecture interesting?
Absolutely fascinating. We talked about this experiment. If you show a child a litre of water in a bucket and show him a litre of water in a tall container, he always thinks that the higher, taller but narrower container has more water in it.
Hold on, what do you show him?
Right. You show him two things. A bucket with a litre of water in it, and also a tall glass vase-like thing or any tall container. This also has a litre of water in it. Now, He will say that the tall thing has more in it than the short fat thing, that is, the bucket. And all children will say this, that is, up to about 5 years of age. You can then actually pour a litre of water from the bucket into the taller, narrower container, and the child will still say that the tall container contains more water, even though he's just seen the water come out of the bucket.
And what's the point of that? Is it about measurement?
No, it showed how children are quite unable to think logically. It's connected with my assignment. It's about cognitive development of young children over time. That's to say, it's about how they think. But didn't you do that assignment last year?
No, I didn't. You see, I missed out on the first year when I changed subject.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
I started psychology in the second year, which is where I am now.
Lucky you.
I'm not so sure. I've missed out on a lot of the basic stuff like that, and I will have to catch up in my own time, so I'm relying on you.
Oh yes, I remember. What did you study before you changed?
I studied law.
Why didn't you continue?
I found some of the subjects interesting enough. In fact, the criminal area was fascinating in general. But a lot of the law is very technical. It's full of little details which can be very difficult to understand. And I've got a terrible memory too. I could never get all the rules and exceptions into my head. My number one hate really was international trade, which was a minefield of rules and exceptions. In fact, I think it was a complete nightmare.
But law is such a popular subject. Lots of people would like to study it.
I'm sure they would, but they often don't realise that it's very book-based. You spend most of your time reading about famous cases sitting in a stuffy library, and very occasionally you get out to a lecture or maybe a seminar.
What do you find that's better about psychology?
Most of all, I like the experimental psychology we have to study. This involves doing something, so it's practical, and with any luck you can make a small, okay, very small, contribution to knowledge. And it is so useful in many careers, for example, business, commerce, education.
Law is too, you know.
Yes, but the training is so long. You have to spend at least another 2 years on a professional practice course before you can start working. No, I'm happy with psychology.
Well, as a psychology student too, I must say I agree with absolutely everything you've said, of course.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture on cities of the future. You now have 30 seconds to read questions 31 to 37.
OK, we've been looking at how societies will develop in the future and at the increase in the size of cities. So I want to talk to you today about the key considerations in these cities of the future. There are 3 key elements I want to look at, and these are the new features they will have, issues of size, and the main problems to be considered. First of all, individual transportation will be a big factor in these new megacities as public transport becomes unmanageable. There'll be a huge rise in the use of segways, which are personal transporters like motorized scooters. As a result, and partly also to reduce pollution, roads will be altered so that they are narrower and will take up less of a city's space than they do currently. Naturally, this is a major change to the infrastructure, and something that may hinder it is the huge amount of investment it will require. The next thing is, what is going to happen to the commercial areas? We do not want these to become even larger concrete jungles than they are at present, so we have to look at design. And current designs for city development include building gardens on the roofs of these buildings to make a more pleasant environment for workers. And you may think that these areas will expand to cope with increased commercial activity. In fact, the prediction is that they will cover 1/5 of the area that they do at present as we build upwards. The exception to this is shopping centres, which we predict will expand with more and more temperature-controlled malls. What may cause difficulties is that the superstores will be confined to the outer edges of the city, as they will be too big to fit into the new malls. Then, of course, there are the residential areas, and these will undergo their own changes. One particular development will be houses which are built from glass, as innovations in this material allow it to provide light without causing problems with temperature inside a building. The residential areas will not be allowed to expand without limit, as happens in some areas at present, and their size will be restricted to a population of 15,000. One issue, which has yet to be resolved, and I'm not sure it ever will be, is how we manage to house older residents. They will be increasing in numbers as time goes on. Finally, how will these cities live? We know we have limited energy sources, so what will we do? Well, something currently in development, which will be a feature, is that waste is going to become an energy source. For example, to provide gas in homes. Also, as new technology and systems are developed, we will find that energy plants will become smaller. Another energy source we could use, but one which raises issues of having enough space and too much noise, is wind farms. Because of the problems, I'm not convinced these will be the grand solution to our energy problems that we thought they were going to be.
You now have 15 seconds to read questions 38 to 40.
Now, moving on to looking at the social aspect of cities, we need to look at housing and how people will live. Cities currently have flats in the centre, populated by single people and wealthier residents, and families tend to move to the outskirts. In the future, the centre of cities will see a dramatic change. We will see many more examples of cooperative buildings. This is where people join together to form a company that owns the building they live in. And despite continuing shortages, there will also be a rise in the provision of retirement homes in city centres, so that the elderly can have easy access to hospitals and shops. Recently, we have seen a levelling off in the growth of private housing, and I think that will not change. But we are likely to see more social housing, as far fewer people will be able to afford to own their own homes. OK, now, if anybody has any...